The critique of like compensation transparency is often, well, we want people to be teammates and work together and collaborate. And if you look in the sports world though, where people are actually teammates and they do have to collaborate, all of their compensation is completely public. In fact, each of us can look up anybody's compensation in the sports world and get it exactly accurate. And somehow it seems to work. So I'm not totally bought into the idea that you need to keep compensation non-transparent. Now, because you can't make decisions, you don't want to be making all these decisions yourself, you have to create tools that enable people to make decisions at the same level, ideally, of fidelity that you would make them yourself. So how do you create scale and leverage? First thing I'd recommend is building a dashboard. This is an old square dashboard. It actually looks pretty presentable even today. The construct of a dashboard, first of all, should be drafted by the founder. You need to basically simplify the value proposition in the company's metrics for success on a whiteboard. You can have other people build the dashboard. I don't actually care about that. But you need to draw it out. Like, what does business success look to us, and what are the key inputs to those? And then have someone create something that is very intuitive for every single person in the company, including customer support, to use. And then the key metric of whether you've succeeded is what fraction of your employees use that dashboard every day. If it's actually useful, it should be close to 100%. It's not going to be probably 100%, but you want to measure that. Just like you have quality scores for all your other KPIs with users, the dashboard needs to be as intuitive as your product is for users. Other things, wait, hold on. Yeah, let's go back one second. Another concept is transparency, and people will often, that's weird.
We'll fix it.
Okay. Transparency people talk a lot about. It's kind of a goal that everybody ascribes to, but when push comes to shove, very few people actually adhere to it. So let me walk through a little bit of transparency and different stages of transparency. Metrics are the first step, so everybody in your company absolutely should have access to every single thing that's going on. Other things that I like to do are take your board decks, and as you get more formal, the board decks will get more complicated, and actually review every single slide with every single employee after the board meeting. You can strip out the compensation information if you really want to, but every other slide you should go through with the entire employee base and explain it, and if you can remember some of the feedback you got from your board, that's really cool to pass on. Another thing we did at Square, as your company scales, everybody's not going to get invited to every meeting, but they're going to want to go to every meeting. The way you scale that is you create notes for every meeting, and you send it to the entire company. So we created a notes at alias for every single meeting involving more than 2 people. Someone would write notes and send it to the entire company. So people felt like as the company added employees, they could continue to monitor and track what was interesting, what was going on, and they never felt excluded, hopefully. The other thing is even details around conference rooms. Every conference room at Square has glass walls. Because as soon as you have regular walls, people wonder what's going on. It's amazing, if they can see who's actually in the meeting and who's meeting with who when, they don't worry nearly as much as what's going on behind those closed doors. Stripe, you may have seen a blog post, but I think Patrick wrote it about email transparency, about actually allowing everybody to have access to email. That's pretty far out there, but it's actually got interesting, certain merits to it. I would all call the tactics that you read about and hear about as sort of minimal viable transparency. I actually think you could push the envelope a lot more. Steve Jobs tried this at Next. He actually tried transparent compensation. I actually think, although Next didn't do extremely well, it wasn't the real reason wasn't because of the experiment around compensation transparency, and that there's a lot of merit to that. And the critique of compensation transparency is often, well, we want people to be teammates and work together and collaborate. And if you look in the sports world, though, where people are actually teammates and they do have to collaborate, all of their compensation is completely public. In fact, each of us can look up anybody's compensation in the sports world and get it exactly accurate. And somehow it seems to work. So I'm not totally bought into the idea that you need to keep compensation non-transparent. Then finally, metrics. So you want to measure things. You want to measure outputs, not inputs. And again, you should dictate this yourself. You should draft the dashboard to tie this all together. One important concept are what are known as pairing metrics or pairing indicators, which is if you measure one thing and only one thing, the company tends to optimize to that, and often at the expense of something else that's important. A classic example in payments and financial services is around risk. It's really easy to give the risk team the objective and say, we want to lower our fraud rate. It sounds great. until they start treating every single user in this audience as a suspect user because they want to lower their fraud rate. So they require each of you to call them up on the phone and give them more supplemental information and fax in things. And you have the lowest fraud rate in the world. You also have the worst, sort of customer satisfaction score. So what you want to measure at the same time as your fraud rate is your false positive rate. That forces the team to actually innovate. Similarly, you can give recruiters metrics around hiring. And guess what? You'll have a lot of people come in through interviews, but if you're not tracking the quality of hires, you may be very unhappy with the quality of people you're interviewing or the people you're giving offers to. So you always want to create the opposite as an indication and measure both, and the people who are responsible for that team need to be measured on both.